This is this Blender tutorial on how to make this cool looking object with this wave texture and how to make it abstract like this. So here we go. So first we want to make this background element, right? So we want to press A to select all and X to delete. Then we want to press Shift A, add mesh, and you want to go to plane. Press S and 8 to make sure it snaps up to the 8th grid, so we can just make it bigger. Then we press tab to go into edit mode. And so you don't have to do this, but it just in general looks a lot better when you render it. So you want to select two vertices by pressing shift click this, and shift click this. Then you want to press E and then Z to snap it to the Z axis so it only moves up and down. And then just drag it to where you see necessary. So I think this is good. Then I want to select these two vertices, deselect these two. You press all this by doing shift click, by the way, then press Control B. Then I want to just drag it out, and you'll see it's like this really weird line. So to fix that, just scroll up, and that line becomes a lot more fine. So I don't want it to be too big, so I'll just set it to that. That's good. And then I will shade smooth to make sure it's smooth. Now we have this seamless curve, which will look really nice in the render. Now we're going to add our objects. So this is just using basic objects. So what I do is I go to add mesh, and then I have all these meshes, right? You won't have this many meshes when you first look at it. So what you want to do is you want to go to add, preferences, go to extra, and then type in extra objects. Just press the checkbox on both of these. I already have them added. So I wanted to start with a cube because I feel like the cube is just better. So I press G and Z to snap it up on the Z-axis so that I can move it up and down on the Z-axis only. Then I'll move it a little higher, and I want to rotate it, right? So I do that by pressing R. So I want to make it stand on its point. Now, if I wanted to perfectly do that, I could go to 45 and 45. Then it's like a perfect edge, right? But I want this to look, a little sloppy, because it kind of adds that effect, right? So I can press RR, and then now it just follows my mouse wherever I move it, right? So I want to just get it to stand on that point just a little, right? So like that. So now I want to just move it so that it just touches the ground. There, so now it's just touching the ground. And now we have our first object. I'm going to scale this up just so that it doesn't interfere with our objects. Then I'm going to add our next object. So if you did the extension, you can add stuff like a round cube, which is just this, solid cube that you could just shade smooth and it'll look like that, right? So I guess I'll add a round cube. So actually, round cubes are it won't look that good against sharp objects, so I'll add a cone. So I'm just gonna make this, instead of as chaotic as the one I showed you earlier, I'm gonna make this a little easier. So I'll make it like a stack like this. If you want to take the time and stack them like this, like rotate it and then stack them all like this, and perfectly synchronize them. Yeah, this is where Blender gets creative. You can just do what you want. I'm just showing you how to do it. So I'm gonna take this, right, and then I'm gonna right click to shade it smooth, so now it's smooth. And now I'm gonna stack it right on top of this cube, right? I can just eyeball it and just keep rotating it until it's right on top of that cube. Now we have this. And I'll add a torus, which is like a donut looking shape, right? It's one of my favorite shapes because you can do so many things with it. So now I want to press shade smooth first. And I shall, actually I'll leave the torus for the top. Let's get a little advanced. Let's do a math function, and I will do XYZ math surface. Now we have this object that you can't really see that well, but if I go to add a XYZ function surface, there's a ton of different objects that you can use. My favorite is this rigid torus, because it's just a really abstract looking object. So I shall add that, and I'll actually make it two toruses. So now we have this cool looking torus, and then I'll scale it down by pressing S and then just moving my mouse closer and closer to the center. And I'll make this torus on top of this. Actually, I'm going to put this torus in the middle of this torus because I think that'll look good. So I'll put this torus right on top of this torus. Then I'll take this, and I want this to be perfectly vertical like this. So I want to set the X and Y rotation to 0. That's horizontal, so I want to set this to 90. There, now it's perfectly vertical. And I'll set this to 0 so it faces forward. And then I shall just scale this down and just bring it forward. Like that. So now we have this really cool looking object. Although, I'm actually going to delete the torus because in the wave texture, it actually goes off of the amount of vertices, and you see how these are like really clean. The torus is really messy, so I'll take another object. What else? Cylinder. I'll take the cylinder and I'll press Z to move it up. Then I want to make it like very skinny, so I'll press S, and then when I press S, it just makes it smaller, right? So when I want to snap it to only move it on one axis, I'll press S and then X. And now it'll only move on one axis, so S, Y, and then if I scale it down like that, it looks a lot better, right? So I'm going to take this value over here and then just copy and paste it to our X so we have that evenly distributed and it still looks like a cylinder. And now I just want to, I'll rotate this a little so that it just fits perfectly in that torus. Okay, so now we have this, we have our objects, right? We're done with the sculpting. Now, what we want to do is press Shift A and then add a camera, right? This is how it's going to look in the render. So, in order to render something, we need a camera so that we can actually see what to render. So, the camera is all the way down there because that's just where it is. That's where the origin spawns. So, we can move our 3D viewport around and then just find an angle that you think looks best. I'm going to go right in front because I find that looks best. And then I'm going to press Control, Alt, numpad 0. You don't have to be selecting the camera, it'll just do it by itself. So now I see that we're perfectly in frame, but I don't really want that. I kind of want to see more. I want to see the background, right? So I'm going to set it right here. Control, Alt, numpad 0. So now we have this looking torus object, right? So now this is the part where you want to go into material preview. Okay, so these are just basic Blender materials, and we go to shading. This is the shading tab, and this is where you can shade objects to make them look better, right? So we want our objects to have that, that transparency on that object, right? So what we want to do is we want to go to, I don't know why my mouse disappeared, but we want to click this new button, right? and it adds this new material. So this principled BDSF might look really complicated. It's just a bunch of different options that we don't want. So we want to press X to delete it, right? Let's move this out a little and let's add a mix shader. Mix shader is just mix two shaders in, and you can use this factor to determine like how much of which is being showed where. So if I had a red and a blue thing and I put them both in the mix shader, this would regulate how much red and how much blue I see. So what we first want to do is add that gradient color, right? So let's add a gradient texture. And I'm doing this by pressing Shift A, search, and then gradient. I want to click on this gradient texture, right? Then I want to go to color ramp, right? This color ramp, it's just a bunch of different colors between black and white. It's usually used to adjust this factor here, but I'm going to use it to adjust the colors. So I want to plug the color into the factor, right? So now it's a gradient. And now I want to get an emission shader. And I'll plug this emission shader and plug this into the top one. It's important that you plug it into the top one. Now you see how it's like a gradient kind of texture? So this is the part where you pick your colors. So I'm gonna pick red and blue because I find that works really well on this. So I'm gonna go to RGB and just make one side red and then one side blue. And now I have this really nice color contrast. And I want to take one of these values and just drag it over here. No, wait, I actually want to take this value, put it over here, and then I'm going to select this and press minus, right? So now I have this a lot better shaped texture, which is like only the colors that I wanted, you know, blue and pink. And yeah, now we have this. So now we want to add those waves in between. So we're going to add a transparent BSDF and then plug this into the bottom one. So nothing happens yet, but we can press, now we need to add a color ramp to regulate what's going on here, because otherwise it'll just, you know. So color ramp, and then we want to plug the color into the factor, right? And then we need to add the waves. So I'm going to go to wave, texture, and then plug the color into the factor. And nothing happened yet. So I'm gonna change the scale. I'm gonna scale it down a little. And I'm gonna press Control T, which gives me a texture coordinate. And this won't show up if you don't have the Node Wrangler add-on. I recommend you guys all add it because it's very useful. So just type in Node Wrangler and add this add-on. And yeah, so you don't need to change any here, but oh, I don't know why my cursor keeps disappearing. Sorry. We want to change this vector into object. Yeah, so now it looks like this. And, well, this doesn't matter yet. I'll just keep this at 5. I want to adjust this by the slightest bit. Change the distortion. But I actually want to flip these. Because, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. My bad. So, essentially what I was doing here is I was adjusting the factor to above 1, so we're only seeing this emission shader, which is not what we wanted. We also want to see the transparency shader, so we want to swap these two. Just hold that and drag it over, right? And now you have this adjustable slider. So, you guys can pick it to how far you need it to see fit. I prefer it like pretty fine, so I'm gonna put it like around there. This is good. So yeah, now that we have this, uh, I'm gonna change the distortion so that we have a little distortion on it. Don't worry about this. We're gonna get rid of all of this black stuff in a second. Actually, I'll do that right now. So I want to go to Material Properties, set this blend mode to alpha blend. Right, now we have this, now it's all transparent and it looks really cool. So just drag this up a little more. And yeah, if I go to rendered view, this is how this object looks by itself, right? The detail on this doesn't really matter. And I want to change this, scale it up, or scale it down, however you please, to a point where you don't see that. So I'm gonna go with around this many. And now I'm going to go to distortion and then just scale this up a little. So now we can see it's like a little distorted too. And I can change the detail scale. If I put this detail scale up, it'll just make it a little too distorted. So what I need to do is, so I'm just kind of tweaking around with this to see how I can get it so that it distorts without. Hold on, I'll start the recording back once I can figure out why. Okay, so I figured out the problem. It was because this detail scale was a little too high. It's like, this needs to be 0. Yeah. So now we don't change the distortion too much, but just put it to 0.15, because that's what I found was, actually, just keep the distortion at 0.7, because we don't want it to distort over the edges. We want to keep it like this. And I want it to be just a little more thick. So yeah, now we have this object that I like the look of, so just gonna change the scale once again, just to be a little higher. And there, now you got that nice distortion, as you can see. Make that distortion there, and yeah, we can just adjust this to our liking. Alright, so now we have this object, so we want to make it pop. And we can do that by going to world settings, and then change this to black. World settings is this globe looking thing, right? So if I go into rendered, now it's just the cube. So it'll look like that from the camera. So I want to go back into material preview. Now, we want to have the same material on all four of our objects. So we want to click all of our objects by pressing shift click, and shift click. Then we want to click our last object, and we want to parent them. So, sorry, we don't want to parent them. We want to link them to each other. So we want to press Control L, and then materials. Now, as you can see, they all have the exact same object. I don't like the look of this cone on this side, so I'm going to press RZ and rotate it. Just like that. So now we see we have this nice gradient, and we have this nice looking object. So now we need to add a light if we want to have if we want there to be depth in this photo. So we first want to go to our camera settings, and actually our camera settings are fine. So we want to go to Shift A, light, and then add a area light. So now we can go into our camera, press G and Z to scale this up just above it, and now we want to press rendered. So we don't see anything because the light strand is really low. So I'll change this to about 10,000. That's a bit too bright. 1000. You can adjust this the way you want it. Here, I'll just drag it down a little. Keep in mind that these shadows are not gonna look like that in the render. It's just, it always looks a little worse in the preview. Not sure why. So, in order to make this cube just a little less trippy, I'm just gonna rotate it so that you can see its front. Yeah, so there you go. Okay, and now as you can see on this, I'm not really liking the way it looks because the gradient, it's a bit too, it's not, I can't see enough of the blue. So I'm gonna drag this blue until I have that, until I have that gradient that I like. Gonna add another thing there so that you can see that gradient. And drag this all the way. I'm gonna change this color to a little bit darker. And there you go. Now we have this really nice looking gradient and a texture that I like. So, in the render that I showed you, this was not white. It matched the color of this. So I want to go to color, change it to pink. And still, we're not getting that pop effect, right? There's something off. And that effect that you're looking for is called a bloom. So you want to go here and check bloom. So now we have that like pop effect. You can see the effects and you can see it glowing, right? So that's basically it. You can tweak it how you like it. I'm gonna change this a little because I don't like the way that looks on the And yeah, there you go. And once you're done tweaking, I really recommend you guys tweak with this. It really helps out in your renders. Like for example, I've actually never done this before, but radial, you could like this effect more if you chose it, but I personally like linear. And if you want to adjust the strength of this bloom, you want to go to the strength here and just turn it down or up. I personally like 12, but it's your choice. And you can obviously adjust the size of this, though don't keep it over a certain amount. You don't want to see that effect like over here, like how you're seeing it. So I'd recommend keeping it pretty low. And then I'm gonna scale it down just a tiny bit. And yeah, now once you're done with all of that, you want to pick a render. Actually, you don't need to do that, but you want to just press F12. See, I still have that thing there, so I just need to change the scale a little higher. And then F12. See, now we don't have any of those squares. We see that distortion that we wanted. And yeah, that's basically how you do it. Now, in order to export this, you go to... Oh, by the way, most people won't like the look of shadows here. I personally do, but if you don't like it, you want to go to here, this object properties, for display, and then shadows. You want to just tick those off for all of them. So shadow, shadow, and shadow. So now if we go to material preview, I'm actually just going to leave the shadows there, but if you really don't want it, you just could just uncheck this and then, yeah, and then once you're done with that, press F12, and now we get all the textures that we want. And as an added bonus, I can quickly show you how to animate this. So let's go to layout, and now we have this thing on the bottom corner. So let's go to rendered, and then let's pull up a new tab. So hold this and then just drag it, and then go to change this into the shader editor. So now we see our shading, right? And I'm gonna scope in on this wave texture. So keep this at 0, and we're just you can just press insert keyframe on this, and then you can go to, like, I don't know, frame 100 for example, and then just, you know, pick something, like change one of these values. You might want to change the phase offset, for example, because I find that looks a lot better. It'll just keep moving this way, and then you would press insert keyframe again, and that's it. You have that animation. And yeah, uh, that's it. I'm pretty sure Rohit will be coming out with another tutorial, but yeah, that was it. Thank you.